started. So again, my name is Matt Pritchard. I'm the publisher of Maximus. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I also want to thank the University of Portland for sponsoring this event. And I also want to thank our partners over by the windows there, great tablers. We have Susan and Amanda from the Nonprofit Association of Oregon. We have Steve and his new colleague from the Social Venture Partners of Portland. And I believe we've also got the Kaplan School from the University of Portland. And we may have hands-on Portland as well. So please join me in welcoming both our tabling organizations and a big round of thanks to our sponsor, the University of Portland. So our program for tonight's straightforward. We're going to have a panel discussion for about 45 minutes. I've gotten questions from many of you in advance that we'll put to our panelists. But we want to hear from you all. We particularly want to hear the kind of job search challenges and career management problems you're wrestling with. So please let us get your questions, and we will do that at about 7 o'clock. We also have a raffle. If you haven't turned in your raffle ticket, please do so. We're going to do that about 7:30, and we've got some terrific prizes. If you're tweeting, and we encourage you to tweet, the hashtag is MaxList, and our Twitter handle is @Max_list. Finally, I think many of you may know about MaxList. If you, how many out there, please raise your hand if you get our Tuesday newsletter. Okay? If you don't, every month we have about 400 job listings. Many of them are in the nonprofit world, and you can get them in your inbox every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And we encourage you to sign up for that. Just go to maxlist.org. But we're more than a job board. As many of you may know, as many as 8 out of 10 jobs never make it to a job board. They get filled by word of mouth through what's called the hidden job market. And many of the job seekers we meet at Maxlist struggle with the nuts and bolts of job hunting. And that's why we do events like this. It's also why we have a blog with practical advice about job search. And we also do a free weekly podcast every Wednesday called Land Your Dream, or Find Your Dream Job, rather. Any podcast listeners out there, please raise your hand. It doesn't have to be our show. But if you're interested, you can find it also on our website. And we interview national career experts about job hunting. We also have a book, which you all got, and I encourage you to read it. I'd be delighted if you would email me and let me know what you think of it. And I'd be especially grateful if you would write an Amazon review. And finally, we do have some courses that also teach job hunting skills. You can find those on our website. So let's do a quick survey. How many people are, raise your hand if you're currently working in a nonprofit? Okay, looks like about 30% of the audience. We've got some panelists up here too. How many are interested in transitioning to a nonprofit? Okay, a bigger group. So you're in the right place. As we have a panel here who can tell you about nonprofit careers in Oregon. And I just want to can everybody hear me in the back? No? Raise your hand if you can't hear me in the back. All right, we got one guy back there. So I'm getting it really close to the mic. All right. Let's start by introducing our panelists. To my right is Jenny Thompson, and Jenny is the Executive Director of the Police Activities League of Vancouver. And she joined the league in the summer of 2015, just as she was graduating from the University of Portland with her MBA in Nonprofit Management. So go Pirates. Great. And she brings more than 10 years of experience in youth development work, and she has a passion for giving back to her community. Next to Jenny is Nancy Ramirez Arriaga, and Nancy serves as the board president of the Nonprofit Association of Oregon. She's committed to strengthening the capacity of individuals, organizations, and the nonprofit sector to help create social change. And throughout Nancy's career, and it's more than 16 years that she's spent in the nonprofit sector, she's contributed to the nonprofits in different capacities. She's been a strategist, a developer, a director, advisor, consultant, and board member. To Nancy's right is Amy Varga. And for more than 20 years, Amy's helped executive leaders and board members transform organizations. Before she became a consultant and a coach, Amy held positions with responsibility for strategic planning, fundraising, event strategy, and planning, as well as alumni and community relations at a wide variety of organizations, including a domestic violence agency, Habitat for Humanity, Clackamas Community College, and Willamette University. And our final panelist is Kimberly Sheng. And Kimberly is the executive director of the Black United Fund of Oregon. Her career has been concentrated in community development with a demonstrated passion for youth and families. In addition to her contributions to the state of Oregon, Kimberly's worked nationally and globally on service projects that have emphasized youth education attainment and family stabilization within the cultural context of those regions. So it's a great group. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. So Nancy, if you don't mind, let's start with you for our first question. We meet a lot of people at Access who are interested in working in the nonprofit sector, but sometimes, because it's a new world to them, they don't have a clear understanding of the diversity of that world. Could you give us a kind of a big picture perspective on Oregon's nonprofit scene, and specifically tell us a little more about the work of Nonprofit Association of Oregon?
Well, it's great to be in good company with so many people that want to transition into nonprofits. We are definitely in need of passionate people. That being said, as Mac was asking in terms of what's the overall picture of the nonprofit sector, raise your hand if you have a passion for something. Well, there's probably a nonprofit. And if not, there's one under development. In Portland specifically, we have the highest per capita nonprofits than any other city in the U.S. We have about 10,000 nonprofits, and they cover, like I said, all passions and industries, so healthcare, education, social services, anything that you can really think about, the arts. So I think sometimes folks think about nonprofits kind of just about like our starting nonprofits or our social services nonprofits, but actually nonprofits are pretty, they range. A lot of people don't know that universities are nonprofits, hospitals are nonprofits. So really there is the universe is open for possibilities for folks that are looking to join the sector. Let me see what else. So nonprofits contribute to the economy. In Oregon, they provide about 12% of the total private sector jobs. Let's see. Is there anything else specifically that you wanted me to add?
That's a great overview, and it's actually a nice transition, Nancy, to a question I know that a number of people raised with me before our panel discussion. I'm going to turn to you, Jen, because you've done it, and the question is this. People are working in the private sector, they want to get into the nonprofit world. How do you do it? And you had that experience, Jen. You were working for a for-profit company, and now you're running your DVD of a nonprofit. How did you make that happen, and what lessons did you learn that you might want to share with our audience?
Well, gosh, first of all, I can't talk, excuse me. It's such a pleasure to be up here and sharing this with some amazing other women in the nonprofit world. So I feel very honored and humbled. So I did start, and after college, I went into the for-profit sector. I actually worked for Moon Truck Chocolate. Who loves chocolate? Right?
You got some chocolate fans on there.
Excellent. And I found out pretty quickly that I was missing something. And maybe one of the things that you are feeling, being in the for-profit industry, is sometimes that heart piece isn't as present as you want it to be. And you want your goal not to just be the dollar at the end of the day, but maybe something a little bit more. Which is what prompted me to say, maybe I need to go back to the nonprofit world or into that field. So I chose as my transition, actually, AmeriCorps. I was an older AmeriCorps member, but it was a great way for me to make a short-term commitment, test the waters, and make sure this is something I really wanted to do. And I loved it. I was happier, my friends noticed that, and it was a great transition. And from there, I was able to kind of open up some doors in the nonprofit world. Sometimes it's really hard to get into the nonprofit world in some fashion. A lot of people will tell you to go volunteer, join a board, but another way is to find that kind of applicable experience, and AmeriCorps was that for me. And then I used my degree to launch me into a management position so I could make a living. Because that's the other struggle with nonprofits sometimes. So that's the short answer. Anything else I should add, Mac?
No, I think you've got some great tips there, which is volunteering, service on board, and getting an educational credential that I know when we were talking before the event, you said that gave you credibility that you wouldn't have if you were just applying without a graduate degree. Well, I know people in the audience are thinking, well, what are some other things we can do? And we'll talk more about that. But you've got a staff job, Jenny, which is terrific. But there are a lot of roles you can play and get paid to do in the nonprofit world. One is being a consultant. And I'm turning to you, Amy, because that's what you do and make a living. You hire people or work with other consultants. Tell us how that happened, what do consultants do, and if people are interested in following that path, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, well, I would say the first thing that is really important is I find, and even when I was starting this journey to be a consultant, it's confusing. What is a consultant? What do we do? What does that word even mean? And I think it's important to realize that sometimes people use the word consultant interchangeably when they might mean freelancer or facilitator or contract employee or interim leadership of some sort. And those are all really important things that someone can do to support the work of nonprofits or amplify or accelerate the work of nonprofits, but they're all very different things. And so I thought it might be helpful to just clarify that for folks. So a freelancer or contract employee, which I think is the easiest path into kind of going on your own. Oftentimes that's an attractive reason for lifestyle reasons, or if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you want to jump out on your own for whatever reason. A freelancer is someone that does the work that a staff person might do, but just as a contractor. So an example of that might be you'll be a grant writer for an organization. So instead of the organization hiring a full-time grant writer and creating a position like that, they might hire someone to write grants for them. And that would be your being a freelance grant writer. A grant writing consultant is someone that helps that organization create this grant strategy for the organization and probably wouldn't write the grants themselves. And someone who's a facilitator is someone that would not define the end goal, like we want grants as a strategy for ourselves. But they might say, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And let me help you design a process to figure out the answers to what you want to do. And so they facilitate a process for an organization without necessarily the end goal defined at the front end of it. And so I think it's helpful, just as people are thinking about this journey into a capacity builder space, which is what all of these things are. How do we help organizations grow their capacity to do more work? What is it that you're doing? As a consultant and as a facilitator, I think those are defined skills that you have to learn and grow. As a freelancer, you can take the skills that you've learned on the job doing something and then apply it to do that same thing just as an independent person. But I don't think it's kind of like a good coach or someone that was a great player might not necessarily be a good coach. And being a consultant is a good coach, and that's its own body of work and its own knowledge. And I learned that kind of the hard way, I thought, oh, I have, at the time, 17 years of work experience in the nonprofit sector. And I've been teaching MBA classes and doing all these things, and so I'm legitimate to be a consultant. And what I learned really quickly is that I really had to learn how to be a consultant and how to help organizations in a different way than doing a job for them. And I'm really passionate now about continuing my own learning trajectory on that and really helping other consultants and being part of a community of practice of other consultants, because what I want to make sure is that I'm not wasting anyone's money and that I'm using organizations' money to its highest and best purpose. And that's something that I'm really committed to, and you have to learn how to be a good consultant, I think. And if you're interested about that at all, separate from this, I'd love to tell you more about what that looks like and where you might get some of those skills and grow those skills.
Thanks, Amy. Well, Jenny, you're working at a local level, and Nancy, you work with a statewide organization. Kimberly, you worked overseas, and you acquired skills that you brought to the local nonprofit scene. I've got a two-part question for you. I meet people all the time who want to live and work in Portland, but be able to do social justice or international nonprofit work from Oregon. So the first question is, what advice would you give people who want to do that? But secondly, I also meet people who often are ready to start a family or just put down roots, and they've been overseas and they want to break into the Oregon nonprofit scene. So how have you seen people do that? I know those are both complex questions, but let me get your perspective, because you've done both.
Well, I can share my experience with that. I actually had two friends that lived here in Portland that started programs. One of them, or actually both of them, were in Kenya, Africa. And these women were very passionate for the population and demographic that they served, and they were really great at logistics in terms of coordinating resources and making sure that they were getting applied in the right areas. However, they didn't necessarily have a social service background. And I actually worked at Friends of the Children doing replication work for them, building chapters of the program around the country, and really looking at the criteria of what it meant to actually select a child into a service, while also still providing wraparound supports to ensure that the family can thrive, without that then being a part of the direct service that we provided. So it was very complex in terms of navigating through that. So these two friends of mine got together and decided that I should come on a trip to Kenya, and they kind of, sold me on going on safari. And I did not realize the extent or the complexity of the work that we would be doing. But my primary focus and role was to help establish a selection process for children in surrounding villages that were impacted by HIV/AIDS. There was a middle demographic of parents that were falling off, and looking at the community structure to decide how did those kids then get invited into a system that can allow them to succeed separate from parents. So my process, I kind of stumbled into it. I had an expertise in terms of establishing process for child selection and also to program structure from my work here in the US, and then I transitioned those skills to my work as a part of this team of women in Kenya. And so I think that answers kind of the short part of that. But what I would say for people that are interested in establishing themselves and doing that work, if they don't necessarily have a friend that's bamboozling them with the thoughts of safari. What I learned on my first trip that I went and did this work on, because I did subsequent trips and then actually did some work in Oaxaca, Mexico that was similar, what I learned through that process is that there's lots of passionate people that think and believe that they want to go and do international work, and they don't necessarily understand the cultural context of what what the organizations need to do to really help people, but help in a way that doesn't demean the culture itself or take away from the goals that those individuals and communities need to set and establish for themselves. We as Americans cannot land in another country and say, this is how you do it. And I saw over and over again people that arrive with that mentality of, I'm just going to show them how to do it. So one of the things that I did as a part of my process so that I could continue to go and do good work was to go back to school. I went back to school and got a master's degree in public administration with the goal of leadership focus, because that allowed me to really look at the cultural context alongside the structures, the systems that these people had to navigate. But because I have a heart for the work, that part was easy.
It's very helpful. Well, let's open it up to the full panel, and I've got some rapid fire questions for you. Let me get your quick hit on this. First, let's start with networking. So we all know we need to network, and I certainly struggled with networking earlier in my career, and I think it's just a natural skill you have to learn. I want to ask each of you quickly, what's your number one networking tip, particularly in the Portland nonprofit world? Jen, you want to go first? Portland metro area, obviously.
Yes, I am over the river.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing. I love going to fundraising events. I think that's a great place to kind of set your feet. And if you can find someone who's going to take you for free because they have a table, that's a really great way to kind of get your foot in the door and meet lots of really amazing people and hear their stories. People love to talk about themselves. So just go talk to people at fundraisers and say, hey, what do you do? Would be a great way to start.
Great. Nancy, number one networking tip.
So I actually really struggle with networking because, believe it or not, I'm a big introvert. So my biggest tip is I always find an extrovert and have a one-on-one conversation, and then I just go with them around and they introduce me to a bunch of people.
That's a great tip. Amy.
So my biggest tip is to think about the other person that you're networking with and what is going on for them. I get probably between 3 and 5 requests for, can I pick your brain for coffee a week? And there's no way that I can accommodate all of those requests. And so here's what I would say, and what I do say to a lot of folks. I genuinely want to help people, and I spend a lot of time trying to do that, but I can't spend coffee with you. And so what is most helpful for me when people reach out to me, and I want them to continue doing that, is that when you email me or you send me a LinkedIn message, that you ask me very specifically what I can help you with. I can't help you figure out what you need help with, but if you figured out what you want or you need help with, like I want to find a major gifts role in a higher education setting, something like that would be very specific. Then I can either make an e-introduction to people for you, or if it's something I'm actually not the best person to help you with, I can redirect you and introduce you to somebody that I think can help you. And that helps me because it helps me know, one, can I help you, what is it that I can do, or who to get you in contact with. And it also helps me help as many people as I can. So it's most of the time not necessary, I don't think, to meet with people in person. I think swapping emails and being kind of pen pals over email is a really easy way, and for busy professionals, and especially people that are executive directors or have big jobs, they're a lot more willing to help you and to actually respond to you if you just ask an email question and not ask to meet with them in person.
I just want to emphasize a point you're making, Amy, which is people do want to help, and they are inclined to say yes. You just have to make it easy for them to say yes. Kimberly, how about you? Number one networking tip?
Ditto with all these ladies said. I also do a great deal of networking at community events. I think the fundraisers is definitely the community events that are really about, either addressing challenges that may exist, looking for strategies or resolution, but also to celebrations. They're a great ways to connect with people, and I don't necessarily choose things to go to that I'm most passionate about, because I also believe in the learning exchange. And it's an opportunity for me to sometimes normalize things that feel taboo or feel awkward or difficult for me by going to a community event where I'm more than likely to meet someone that's like-minded and to be able to better understand whatever that issue is because of the networking process.
Well, this is related to networking. It's volunteering, which is in a way a form of networking. It's also about service and giving back to the community and exploring interests, your passions. In the nonprofit world, two quick questions, and again, I want to open this up to all the panelists. How have you seen people volunteer in the nonprofit world to help their job search? And are there any do's and don'ts that you would encourage people to keep in mind? But Jenny, when you see people volunteer during a job search in the nonprofit world, what works and what doesn't work?
I think what works is being in an industry that's similar to where you want to go into, where you can maybe learn a new skill or share something that you already have. What doesn't work? That's a really good question. Most of the opportunities I've seen have been really positive, so you can't think of something that's really super negative unless you're doing it for the wrong reason. Maybe, I think checking yourself. Have you found the right organization that you are ready to give back to and you're passionate about that? Because if you're not, maybe find something different.
Nancy, what are your thoughts?
So I think one thing to remember is that this sector is a giving sector. It's a very caring sector. So when you find something that you really care about and you go in there with your best intentions and you take whatever skills you do have, they're going to be helpful for the organization. Truly, a nonprofit is just like a business. There's business to get done. And whatever roles exist in the business world exist in the nonprofit world. So as long as you go in there with good intention, trying to help, I think that's going to go a long way. People notice you. And the thing that I would say is really do try to learn the environment and the language. English is not my first language, so I always think about this. And there's great importance in learning an environment and language because people want to know that you care enough to do that. So for example, one of the biggest things that in nonprofit is really noticeable is when nonprofits are referred to as businesses. For example, they want to be referred to as organizations even though they are a business. So just learning small cues like that.
Kimberly?
I want to jump in on that because I agree with everything that you're saying. But I also would add that when you think of nonprofit, it does not mean that it's not for profit. There are still business structure and strategy that needs to be implemented in a nonprofit organization, just like it would be a for-profit, a traditional for-profit organization. And so I think that part of the challenge is looking at your skill set and kind of identifying what things are transferable skills. So when I moved out of corporate setting into nonprofit organization, I looked at my project management skills, I looked at my organizational skills, my writing skills. All of those things were really critical to the transition that I made, and it really wasn't about my experience or knowledge of the nonprofit sector as a whole, but it was those transferable skills that in any organization, and there's that buzzword instead of business, in any organization, those skills are needed and they're desired. And sometimes having those skills could be just a little advantage that you could have over someone else that maybe has a nonprofit background but doesn't have those technical skills.
Any have some thoughts about volunteering, do's and don'ts, and best practices?
Yeah, I would say the biggest question I would ask yourself when you're applying for a job or applying for a volunteer job, I think it's the same. What's the next thing I want to learn? And when you get clarity around that, then you're looking for a role that allows you in an organization, that allows you to learn that. And of course, you're going to contribute through your journey of learning that. So if you want to learn how to be a good manager, as an example, as the next step in your career, look for a role where you're going to be in a position to be a manager, and you're going to be on a journey of learning how to be a good manager. If you want to learn more about how to manage a budget, then look for a role where you're going to be given that opportunity. So I think, when you're looking for a job or a volunteer job, that's an excellent thing to sort of think about for yourself, about what's my learning journey, and where am I at, and where do I want to go, and what do I want to learn?
And I want to throw this up in the full panel. One thing I didn't hear any of you say is a great way to get a job at an organization is to start as a volunteer. And I have seen people follow that path and be disappointed. What are your perspectives on that?
I think it can be really hard to do that. A lot of nonprofits are lean and they don't have a lot of paying positions. And it's hard, even if you have the best volunteer and you want to give them an opportunity, you may never have it. But it is possible. When I worked at Boys and Girls Clubs in Southwest Washington, we had a young man come in and he taught guitar with our teens. Phenomenal volunteer, he made a commitment for 3 months. Then we were able to hire him as a summer staff, because we needed summer staff. He actually was able to transition to a full-time job with us for a while, and now he works with I Have a Dream. He's a success story. He was able to take that volunteer job in an industry that he was unfamiliar with, that was passionate about, and try to discover who he was in that position, and now he's looking at going back to grad school. I don't think that's the norm, because it's really, really hard.
I would say that, I guess in my experience, that has always been the case, where, I actually limit my volunteering because I don't want to take any more contracts at this time. But I think that, it is true, there are financial challenges for nonprofits, and so you may not get a job in that moment with that organization, but if you are passionate and you are committed and you bring your skill set 100% of the time, you're going to be in somebody's mind for when there's a position open or when there's anybody else looking for someone that is a go-getter and is committed. So nonprofits talk to each other all the time, and they're always referring folks to jobs.
I would say that if you're interested in catapulting your volunteer experience into a paid position, to be clear with the organizations that you're volunteering with, that that's something you're interested in, with them or otherwise, and ask for opportunities to go attend a meeting with somebody. Maybe what you're volunteering on isn't fully what you want to work in, but I know when I worked where we had interns and other kinds of volunteers, people that expressed to me that they wanted to learn and they wanted exposure to things that were beyond their volunteer kind of function. I was always happy to take them to a meeting with me, or give them an opportunity to come to an event with me, or just be part of something that wasn't necessarily just part of their volunteer role. So if there's something you want to do that's outside of that volunteer role, ask, or see if that's something that you could do.
Kimberly?
And I agree with that 100%. What I would add is that when I've seen scenarios where that doesn't play out, it's because that communication didn't take place. It wasn't a forthright thing, and so the person that was engaging with the volunteer wasn't aware of what that trajectory needed to be. When I've had opportunities to work with people in a volunteer capacity, and I know that that's what their interest is, it gives me an opportunity to be honest about what my potential is to actually accommodate that, to talk about things that are on the horizon for us to square up what is the timeline around that to make sure that it's really manageable for what it is that that person's hoping to experience. But it also tells me that if I notice and identify that you do something really well, and I just don't have an opportunity for you, then I'm going to use my network to make sure that other people know about you and create that opportunity. But I think the communication, being upfront about it, that's the most critical piece.
Well, we need to turn to our audience in a moment, but I want to ask one final question to the panel. And it's about people who want to break into the nonprofit world, and it's two groups. And if you could address both in your answer, that would be terrific. First, recent college graduates. They don't have experience often. They may have some internships, but they don't have many years of experience. What advice would you give new graduates who want to break into the nonprofit world? And then second, there are people who are mid-career or older who want to get into nonprofits after a career, perhaps in government or the private sector. What advice would you give to them? So, somebody want to go first?
Sure.
New graduates and people senior or mid-career.
So I actually help students get scholarships to go to college. So I interview, meet with young people, or younger people, I'm not going to claim that, younger people I meet with them on a regular basis. And one of the things that I would say is, again, it comes back to that passion issue. But I think that one of the challenges that goes along with passion is having a good support team. You're not going to necessarily come into a nonprofit job like you would going into the tech industry and make enough money that you can, go and buy your first home and, invite your parents over with you. That's not going to happen. So having that good, strong support system around you, whether it's family or friends, that you can be reasonable about your expectation in terms of what it's going to take for you to actually live while you're pursuing whatever that passion might be. I think that's a critical part. And for those of us that are a little more mature, that are breaking into the industry, I would say that probably the biggest hesitation or apprehension that I would have as an employer is, again, the compensation issue. Managing that expectation around what as a nonprofit we can really afford to do in terms of compensation that matches with the skill level that you bring. But I hesitate to say this, but I notice that we just don't get a lot of increase for the positions that we have that are coming from a mature demographic, to be honest with you. I think that the compensation is probably a bigger piece of that. But I would love to have people, working with us that I don't necessarily have to explain, what happened in the 80s that impacted the hedge fund accounts and why that has been impacting education opportunities. So, there's a give and take with that.
Yeah, so for the younger kind of millennials, or is it Z's that are like coming out? I don't know.
Recent graduates.
Okay, recent graduates. I would say don't underestimate yourself. You bring a lot to the table. And you bring a literacy with technology that is really valuable to this sector. Digital fundraising strategy, please come find me if you're interested. There's more people that need your help. So don't underestimate yourself. Believe that you have something to contribute, because I really deeply believe you do. And until you do, I think that's going to impact your job search. And on the flip side, two things, I guess, for boomers or mature folks who are trying to break in. One is have humility. Because you have had a long career in one industry, there's things that you don't know about the nonprofit sector. And so be open to learning and, kind of create that lifelong learning journey that you're not coming in as an expert. I think that spirit is really important to bring to the table. And go talk to them. Honestly, I think Encore Fellows and programs like that help and are designed to help folks who are transitioning from employment and a career into the nonprofit sector are a wonderful pathway. They're sort of the opposite of Jenny's, or the corollary to Jenny's AmeriCorps. They're kind of AmeriCorps-like for boomers. And I generally think that's a wonderful program for folks to explore as a tool.
I'm glad you pointed that out. Please go see the people at Portland Social Venture Partners and learn more about the Encore Fellows Program if you are in my age group.
So I think you'll hear me echoing both of the panelists that just spoke. For the younger generation, definitely, I think you can, how do I want to say this? You kind of get a pass, because you're starting out. And so it's understandable that this is like, you're exploring the world, right? And if you're willing to come in with those fresh eyes and really putting your stamp on things, I think that makes you a great candidate. When I hired in nonprofits, when I was looking at recent graduates, knowing that they wouldn't be bringing the experience that we might get with a more seasoned candidate, I looked at like, so is this person willing to learn? That was really, really high on my list. Is this person coachable? Because if they are, then they're going to be successful. The other thing is that the folks that I promoted, younger folks that I promoted, they were go-getters. They had so much energy. I was saying, you know what, this new project, you go for it. Let's figure it out, and we'll figure out a title and a compensation with it. So really go in there with everything you've got. From the interview all the way through. And for older folks, I think that piece really resonates around humility. It's because you're coming into something new, so you are learning something new, but then also being yourself and bringing everything, like all your years of experience that you've acquired, really use them to your advantage. And I would say just be completely open. I think the folks that, again, I hired that were older, there was a piece about like, how can we work together? Like they say, good managers are those that find people that are smarter than them. So I would try to do that, knowing that. So, but also seeing if the relationship was going to work. Is this person that is going to look at me and think, this person's younger than me? Why do I have to do it this way? Versus, can I just utilize your full strength and experience that you bring?
For recent grads, I personally cannot push or encourage enough AmeriCorps. I think it's one of the best ways to test it out and to get some really amazing experience. Because when you're an AmeriCorps member, you're asked to do things that you don't usually get to do in that role, and it's a great way to kind of learn a lot of things. My 1 year as an AmeriCorps member, I served as essentially a caseworker for foster youth emancipating out of their system. I taught independent life skills, and I ran my very first fundraiser in 10 and a half months. Now I have this resume, this ability to use that as leverage, and I start applying to other nonprofits. And if I'm fortunate enough to have the person interviewing me also be an alumni of AmeriCorps, I'm golden. In fact, that helped me. I was moving back from Denver, and the person interviewing me was an alumni, and he's like, I get it. I know what you did, and I know what you can do, so I'm gonna give you a chance. So I highly recommend that beyond everything else that was said. And then on the flip side, for me, help me understand how I can how your skills are transferable. Help me see that. How can I leverage that in a nonprofit world so that I can see that connection, so that I'm like, oh, I get it. Maybe I've never been an engineer, but now that you've explained that to me, I can see how that's transferable to my organization. I want to hire you. I think that's really helpful because I'm not in that sector.
Well, thank you both, or all of you. And let's turn to you, our audience members. We're going to open it up to your questions. And I encourage you to think about the challenges that are on your mind, the problems you're facing in your job search, and come and quiz our panelists. So Jessica and Ben are circulating with mics. Okay, this is Jessica, and she's got the mic. So if you would raise your hand, Jessica will bring a microphone over to you. We've got over here, Michelle. Melissa.
You might want to test it first. Nope.
Oh, and if you could just, all questioners, just mention your name.
Test. Oh, awesome. Hi, my name is Melissa Madania, and I currently work for a nonprofit and would love to stay in the nonprofit field. But one of the challenges that I've noticed for folks who work in nonprofits is it can be really difficult to advance your career in the same organization, whether it's due to budgetary constraints of the organization that you work with, or just a lack of upper movement for folks who are somewhat ambitious, and thus a lot of nonprofits seem to lose good talent to other nonprofits. So any commentary on that? Like, how can folks advance their career without having to hop between nonprofits every 2 years?
I agree with what you just stated wholeheartedly. When you look at the resume of a person that's had a nonprofit career, it is not going to read that they've been at one place for 15 years. That's almost unheard of. So it's expected that there's going to be lots of movement. One of the things that I would say is that if someone's applying to my organization, we're a lean team. We have 3 to 5 employees at any given time. It really doesn't flex much greater than that. So if you're coming into the organization expecting that you're going to make these leaps and bounds, I can already tell you right out of the gate that's not going to happen. That doesn't mean that there isn't great autonomy with the work that you do, because being lean means that everybody does everything. So there's lots of experience to be built there. And what I would say is that an organization like mine is a great opportunity to come in, learn new skills, be honest about the designated period that you hope to be in that role, and look forward to moving on. I've helped people in my organization move on because they didn't know that they were ready, but I looked at them and said, you're ready, and it's time, and we need to start building your network and getting you out of here, because this is a role that now needs to roll back to another person who needs to build those skills. So in my organization, that's kind of my approach in general. It's not the expectation that you're going to be in it for the long haul, but while you're there, I expect that you're going to be learning and growing and stretching yourself in ways that you're sometimes are uncomfortable on a weekly basis. I say in my office, when you get to your next gig, do not do that. I really want you to focus on this. I say that weekly because that's the complexity of what my team looks like. But I set that expectation because I want people to know that if they're getting someone that came from my shop, that that person understands what it takes to really work hard and dig in and push themselves. But my board and community members expect that I'm going to have turnover in my organization because we're building community, not just buff.
So I was just talking to somebody about this exact thing this morning. If you're interested in it, write down Super Bosses, Harvard Business Review, and go read that article. And you are a super boss. So what a super boss is, it's actually a thing, is when you look at what they found when they did this research, is that there's some people that are bosses that develop excellent talent and help them move and advance their careers beyond their organization. And just like you do. And that's a beautiful thing. And so for people that are strong and ambitious and want to grow, look for a super boss. Look for somebody that has that mindset that says, this isn't just about my organization. This is about our community and our sector. And look for somebody who doesn't have that kind of fear-based mentality and is really about developing their people. And I think it's all good if you leave.
Ditto to what they just said. But also I think really understanding the system. Are there other blockages besides money that are keeping people from moving within the organization? Because that is a different kind of problem, and frankly, I wouldn't want to be in that position if there is no movement. But also looking at it from the other angle, which is, asking for feedback and not just review time, so that you are finding if there are places that people are expecting to see certain kind of improvement in order to make a shift. And then just being honest and saying that, you know, I really see myself doing this, or it's encouraging me to move on. And sometimes that, you know, really shakes people to try to figure out. And if it doesn't, then that tells you something.
I don't think I can add anything. I think they nailed it all.
Terrific. Other questions? Right here.
In your experience, when nonprofits are hiring candidates, are they most interested in seeing candidates that are maybe a little overqualified for a position but can bring a lot to the table, or somebody who maybe has 95% of qualifications they're looking for and the rest would be a stretch and a growth opportunity?
I look for passion. If you can sell that for me in your interview, I'll work with whomever that is. I'll train you as much as I need to train you, or I'll give you as much freedom as I can because you have the skill set.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And then looking at sort of like how people might interpret the overqualification and really speaking to it you know, through your application and interview. If, you know, if there's a candidate that you're looking at that you're thinking, well, they might just want to step in and move on, or, you know, they're not going to last, like, you want to address that head on. Like, I held this position previously, and the reason why I want to go into this one now is for this reason. So really putting, you know, really addressing it.
This is an answer, but it's a slight variation on it, because I want to speak to something that you asked about. I'm really passionate about helping women get into leadership roles. And there's a lot of really interesting research that says women, when they're applying for jobs, if they don't meet 100% of the criteria, they don't apply. Whereas men look at it and they're like, hey, so I'm going to throw my hat in there, you know? So please do that. If you're a woman and you do not have 100% of the qualifications, don't take yourself out of the running. Act like a guy. Throw yourself in the running and let them decide whether or not to interview you.
I agree 100%. So many of the things that are listed or identified on a job description, it's just a big wish list. And there's not an expectation that you're going to be the expert at all those things that are identified on that list. By the time someone's sitting in front of me, I already know if they're qualified to do the work. What I need to know is that they're going to be a fit for my organization and for the team and for the future that we're trying to build. So I don't get so hung up on that. One of the things that I do that kind of throws people for a loop, I ask them, looking at this job description, which, you know, give me 2 or 3 things on here that are the least appealing to you. Because I gotta know where those deficits are gonna be and whether they're strengthening my existing team to build back in and cover that. And then I hire that person and I push them to do those things that they don't like. Those are skills that they need to develop.
Sharing all your secrets here.
And even if you don't ever love it, if you're in a position where you're part of a team or you move into a leadership role, you at least need to understand the process of those things that you don't like so that you can get good production and efficiency. So I still push towards those things that I now know you don't like.
And let me just add that we hear from employers, they don't expect to get 100%. They're looking for 60 or 70% qualifications. So you're both making such an important point. And it also goes back to the point we made originally, Jenny. Many employers do look for culture fit or passion, and they're willing to train. So don't take yourself out of the running if you don't have 10 out of 10. Other questions? Go ahead, Jessica.
Hi, I'm Landon Zerenko, and there are lots of support systems out there for nonprofit organizations, like consultants, me, and like foundations, Nancy. So I'm wondering if you could talk more about those types of organizations and what skill sets are necessary to work in those as well. You started touching on it, maybe, but a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say in the Portland market, most consultants are either solopreneurs, you know, so they're just one woman shops, or they're really small firms. So I have 3 contract employees. that work with me, and a kind of a suite of subcontractors depending on what the project is. But I would say if I was interested at an earlier part in my career journey in pursuing consulting, I would likely go try to work at a large consulting firm. I think that would be a really great training ground, and I think it could have shortened my learning curve. I had to sort of learn on the job, and as I went, in a lot of ways. And I often kind of wondered what it might have been like to have worked for a consulting firm at some point earlier in my journey. So that might be something to explore.
Yeah, in terms of other organizations that exist to support nonprofits, such as the Nonprofit Association of Oregon, again, there's many roles, and just like any other nonprofit, there's work that needs to get done. In terms of, I think the lens is a little bit different in terms of thinking that you're thinking about the sector. So depending on where you're at in the organization, that becomes really, really critical, because you're looking at, how do we, at least as a board member, the way I look at the Nonprofit Association of Oregon is how can we become the best so that we can model that for the sector. So it really, I think bringing in the experience with nonprofits when you're looking at something like at that level, it really is about, how far does the support reach, or what specific type of support does the institution offer? And I think that's where you want to be building your skill set so that you are able to fulfill the mission.
Dan, another question here. Over here, just.
Hi, I'm Kelly Rayner. I actually have a follow-up to Megan's question. The first thing that was said is that you're looking for passion. And obviously, so my question about that is, how do you communicate passion in the application materials in order to get the interview?
I would use your cover letter to show that. I always think of my cover letter as an opportunity to tell that future employer what's not on my resume. So they'll be able to see my resume and see all the qualifications and make sure that I meet whatever minimum qualifications I need. So that cover letter is that attention gainer. It's an opportunity to sell yourself in 2-3 paragraphs and kind of have that be in that piece. Maybe share with a story or something. And that's totally personal for me. Like, as an employer, like, not mad at what these ladies would look for, but for me, it's like, how can you capture that in that first part? I have one employee. She did not even meet minimum qualifications necessarily, because I wanted someone with a college education. But I took a risk on her because she was pursuing her education, she was passionate about what she wanted to do, and I could see the opportunity to train her. And she was able to show that to me, not just in an interview, but in that cover letter that she wrote to me that said, yeah, I want to meet her. I want to see what she has to give me.
And I know people are wondering, what did she say in that letter? Do you remember? Something that stood out, something that really grabbed your attention? Because I've certainly had this experience, I hear it from others, they struggle. They've got 2 or 3 paragraphs to put their best foot forward. Was there something memorable about that letter that you can recall now?
It's honestly been so long. She said in about 3 weeks she'll be 1 year in our organization. So I think for me, because we work with law enforcement, it has something to do with her relationship with law enforcement. That's really key for us. I didn't need someone who's going to be timid and working with police officers when we're trying to connect kids and cops. So I think that's something in that vein, which is mission specific. So I think finding that piece in the mission that you can highlight to show that passion is going to be really key.
Can I jump in?
Please.
I would also say drawing a correlation. First of all, let me say that I agree with that. The cover letter is an opportunity to state the things that are not going to be covered in that resume. And so take advantage of that as an opportunity to showcase and highlight some of the things about yourself that you can't necessarily describe in a bullet point. I fully agree with that. One of the things that, as I'm working with younger people that are building out cover letters and resume, and they don't necessarily have a lot of work experience to list, I told them to think about that mission statement, what about that resonates with you? Because that's going to tell me a lot too. If you can tell me what it is that resonates about the mission and the purpose of the work that we're doing, and I take them through an exercise where I give them the start, I believe. And so finish that sentence with something that makes a connection between a belief system that you hold and also to the passion and mission of that work, because that's giving the person that's reviewing that insight to who you are with greater depth than the bullet points are ever going to really do.
I would say that a mistake that people do in cover letters is that they write, I'm so great, I've done all these things, and blah, 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 blah. And it's all about you, basically. And what you're trying to do is say, here's what I can do for you. Here's what I understand you're needing and where you want to go. And here's how I can help you get there. That's a very different letter than I'm great and let me tell you all the ways, right? It's all about what they're looking for something. They're looking to achieve something, to grow something, to whatever it is. And so you need to flip it, right? Like how can you, with what you're bringing, which is your passion and your skills and your curiosity and all of that, help them achieve what they can. The other thing I would say is, just like in fundraising training, you have to ask for the gift. Be direct. Say, I would like this job. Don't step around that. And when you're in person and you meet with them, say, I would love the opportunity to have this job. Don't just assume that's like obvious. Ask for the job if you want it.
In sales, we call it asking for the order.
Exactly.
Don't leave the room without
But
asking for
that's
the job.
right.
So what I would add to that is the most memorable cover letters for me have been those that really make it clear that you understand what the mission is, and that you understand what the job is and how it connects to the mission. Certainly, yes, hearing about how you're going to help fulfill that mission, but then why? What's the connection to you? That's what I want to know. Like, why are you here? Why are you applying? But I would say, if you're in the position to be able to do that, and you should all be if you're looking for a job, is don't wait until the cover letter. There may be organizations that you're interested in. Try to schedule an informational interview, and you might not get the ED because they have a full schedule, but you might get somebody else in the organization that can tell you what it's like to work in that organization, and you can share where you find alignment.
Can I just say one example? So once when I worked for Clackamas Community College, they had this thing where in the summers they close on Fridays as a cost savings measure for the college. So what I did was those Fridays, instead of hanging out, I made a list of people that I really wanted to meet and learn. And I just systematically set up these meetings. So I worked on that Friday, but I worked by doing exactly what Nancy just said. And it's weird how, it was maybe 12 years ago or something, how those time that I spent with those people has really just randomly paid off in strange ways that I didn't expect.
I came out to Oregon 25 years ago last summer, and I did dozens of informational interviews. I still run across those people in the community because Portland's like any place, it's a small town, and you never know where these relationships and meetings are going to be dividends. And I ended up working for some of those people, some of them ended up working for me. Other questions we've got, we're got about 5-6 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get your questions.
My name is Stephen Crank-Carey. My question is, if there was one piece of advice or a skill you wish you had when you started in this industry, what would it be?
Really master your ability to say no. And that might not apply so much to men as it does to women, but you're also so eager to stay and to move. that you want to say yes a lot, and especially when you're at an organization because you connect with passion to the mission, you want to say yes, but sometimes you really need to say no so that you can really give it 100% on the things that are on your plate.
So to answer this quickly, are there things that what do you say no to?
Well, I think it really depends on what position you have at the time. There's things that you might be able to say no to, and there's things that you might not. But really making sure that you are prioritizing getting what is going to make the... So let me put it this way. The people that I've seen that have been the most successful are the ones that figure out what is going to make the next person's jobs easier. So if you focus on that, like what is the priority, figure out the priorities, and outside of that, that's where maybe you can say no, but that's sort of the skill, learning how and where to say no.
I just want to add on to that because I think that might be what I wish I had learned. It's because it has to do with work-life balance. I have become a lot more protective of my time and looking at, okay, yes, I'm an executive director. Yes, I probably work more than 40 hours a week, but what's a reasonable number of hours? And I try to keep myself to that number of hours, understanding that every once in a while during fundraising season or an event, you might do more than that. Because it doesn't do you any service to work 80 hours a week all the time. You'll be exhausted, you can't do your job, you won't be able to get back to the mission that you so love by doing that. And it's really easy to do that in the nonprofit world because there's always work to be done. I had a boss who actually sent me home as an AmeriCorps member. She's like, what are you doing here still? Like, I still have this list of 10 things. She's like, go home. The list will still be here tomorrow. You'll never be able to finish it. You'll be here all night. Best advice ever.
I would say when I was younger, I wish I would have stayed in roles longer, even when I was super annoyed. Honestly, I think what I wish I would have done was would have looked through the lens more of what's the invitation here for me to learn and grow, instead of say screw it and find a different organization. Because I can say with certainty, having worked in a number of them and worked with a number of them, there's no perfect organization. And so I think I was on a pursuit to find the better, more sane place. And once I stopped doing that and I realized I am going to have to live in a state in a place where it's not perfect, I was able to contribute in a much deeper way.
I agree with everything that was stated here. I think for me, it's been the boundary setting that essentially everyone's just described here. One of the things that I would say in particular is understanding what the ask truly is. And so I have been given lots of opportunities and invited to participate in a number of things without being clear about what the ask really is. There are times when we discussed this briefly during the networking time where you're invited to a situation and you're given a seat at the table, but it's not because there's an expectation that you're actually going to speak at that table. It's about checking the box and marking the list so that the right people around the table, but we can be tunnel in our thought process and continue on business as usual. And I found myself too many times in those circumstances where I looked at a situation and said, that's a great opportunity. And I was raised in a house with 3 older sisters and no brothers. So my father built in an expectation that we had a voice. So if I'm invited to the table, I expect to speak. So I had that real awakening a number of times before I realized that the common thread in that scenario was me, and that I needed to do a better job of understanding the ask.
We have time for one more question, then we'll announce the winners of the raffle, and then we'll break, and there'll be time for networking, and so you'll have a chance to speak to our panelists one-on-one if you haven't had a chance to ask a question yet. Who would like to ask our final question? I see 2 hands. I saw yours go up first. So, I'm sorry. have somebody back there, Jessica?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we go with it, the person you were standing with? Sorry.
Who are we choosing?
This lady here.
All right.
She changed her mind.
Go ahead. Yes, it's all you.
So my question is, we kind of touched on it briefly. I'm currently a volunteer with an organization I really appreciate and passionate about the mission, and wasn't really quite sure how to address, hey, I would love to work here and I would love an opportunity to do so. Also in informational meetings, I don't know how to be direct, I don't know how to say, I feel like, does it sound desperate? How do I communicate and express myself to you? So I was actually wrapping up a volunteer opportunity today, and it was like the end of the project, and I didn't really know how to say, hey, I saw a position open, I would love to be part of this group. How do I, who do I need to talk to? So could you just kind of touch on that briefly?
Yeah, so I've had personal experiences with that, and I think what I found out for myself was that when I had trouble, it was because I was too into myself. And so I turned it around and thought about well, what do I want to do for them? So, I'm really interested in continuing to serve the organization, right? You're not saying, I want this job, but I hear the piece about you're struggling with being direct, so sometimes you have to find another way to be direct without being direct, if that makes any sense.
So, I'm going to be very direct. I don't want you to be apologetic for wanting an opportunity. If you have put in that time and you've volunteered and you've been a part of that team capacity, you've volunteered, you've given that organization something. The least that organization can do is give you the opportunity to apply, to give you the opportunity to speak your truth about what it is that you see for yourself. That is not too much to ask. And I would ponder that if you were in a volunteer position and you're not making clear, I'm interested in the opportunity, that employer is making the assumption that you've got other priorities and other things going. And there are lots of different ways that people come into a volunteer situation. That's not necessarily because they're passionate about what it is that they're there to serve and do. It could be a service requirement for a graduate program, or maybe it's just something that's an add-on to something that you're studying or that you're interested in. And so what I can tell you is that in my nonprofit, you're extremely busy. I use the analogy that it's like drinking from a fire hose. And so if you're not telling me this is what I'm interested in and this is the place that I want to go, then I'm making the assumption that this is a limited duration situation, and that I've got to get the most out of you that I can before you move on. So don't be apologetic about asking for what you want.
It may sound corny, but practice. Find your friend, your roommate, your significant other, someone else, and say it to them. Work out what you want to say in advance, and it'll be easier because you'll find the words that feel good to you in asking that direct question. But sometimes you have to actually say it out loud first before you go in to do that.
Yeah. So thanks for saying that, because I think that's kind of where I was headed in terms of find your own way. So I wanted to take a shot again at this, responding to this question, because I think there's a cultural piece here for me, and that is that that there's a way that we expect that a certain way of communicating is more, it could be more perceived as more direct, but what I found for me was that I just need to be me, and for me, sometimes to ask for an opportunity, it really isn't about me. Where the place that I come from is really around service. And so for me, I was having a hard time to saying I want to do this, because that's not that's not where I come from. It's more around how can I serve this population? How can I serve this organization, the sector? And so that's what I was meaning about, maybe, you have to find your own way to communicate that. And it may not seem direct in the way that is expressed in this organization or in this culture, but it may be your own way of being direct.
Can I jump back in too? I'm sorry.
No, I have nothing I can do. You guys are doing a good job.
This is just practical advice. If you're in a volunteer situation and you're actually working with people that are on staff, it's an opportunity for you to get some insight from those people that you're on staff with, working on that project, to say, hey, I think I might like to have an opportunity to work here. What are your thoughts around the process or what that would mean? Who do you think I should talk to about that? And then over the course of working on that project, find out that this is terrible, that everyone that has worked in an organization knows that the staff knows when that person is open to having a conversation and when that person is not. Rely on those people to tell you this is a good day, you should go in and have that conversation today. You should have that now, like, move. Or to get that feedback, and you know what, it's been a stressful week, a board meeting is coming. I wouldn't necessarily bridge that right now, but on Wednesday afternoon after the ice breaks, I think that you should make sure, let's get you on the calendar kind of thing. People around you, if they're enjoying the process of working with you, they're going to help support you in making sure that that conversation is authentic and that it's your own. And chances are what they're going to do as soon as you leave is run into that person and say, hey, this person wants to work with us, wouldn't that be great? So take advantage of that to navigate it in a way that makes sense and feels authentic for you, but to do your homework about the organization while you're in it to make sure. You might find out through that process of talking to other staff members that really the work is something that you enjoy, but that's not the place that you want to be.
Final wording?
On this topic or any? Any
The floor
topic?
is yours.
Hey, well, there is actually one thing I wanted to say, and catch me after and I'll hang out if this is something you want to talk about. I did want to say, so I'm 42 and I have a 3.5 and a 6-year-old. And I have a partner who works full-time like me. And I wanted to say that if you want to be a parent in this sector, you can be. It's crazy, it's hard, but if that's something that you want to have as part of your life, I really want to tell you that you can be a parent and you can be part of the dual working partnership and do this thing. It's hard, and I would love to tell you kind of what that experience has been like for me. But I've heard from some people who are younger in this space that, I have a coach or a mentor or have had in classes who maybe aren't even with a partner at this point, but they wonder if they can be a parent and make that choice and do this kind of work. And you can. And I really want to help people realize that that's, you don't have to choose between those two things.
I think that's a great note to stop on. Please join me in thanking all of our panelists. I'm going to announce the winners of the raffle in a moment, but I also want to ask you to join me in thanking our the groups who tabled today. We've again got Portland Social Venture Partners. You can ask them about the Encore Fellowship. We have the team from Nonprofit Association of Oregon, and of course the Pamplin School of Business here at the University of Portland has a table, and they are our host and our sponsor. So please join me in thanking both the school and our tabling organizations. Hands on today, Portland. Jessica just reminded me. So we did do our drawing, and the third place prize was a tie, and the winner, and we're going to give 2 prizes for the third place because we had a tie. It's a Maximus mug, and the winners are Sierra Acker and Ellen Roney. Sierra, Ellen, want to raise your hands? Second place is a copy of Joshua Waldman's Job Search for Dummies with social media. It's a workbook. And the winner is Siobhan T. Siobhan, you want to raise your hand? And the first prize is an informational interview with me down at the Maximus offices in downtown Portland. And the winner is Leslie Gordon. Leslie, you want to raise your hand? Okay, great. And I think that is it. We have the room for the rest of the evening. The panelists, I think, are going to stick around for a while. We've plenty of snacks and refreshments, so please stay and work with both our panelists and the